Welcome to our lesson on self-evident truths, equality, and unalienable rights. Today, we're diving into some of the most important and challenging ideas in American history, ideas that changed the world when they were first written down in the Declaration of Independence, and that still affect how we think about fairness and rights today. Here's what we're doing today. We'll start by reading and breaking down the Declaration's most famous statement about equality and rights. We'll talk about what makes something self-evident, why logic matters, and what was truly new and bold about the founders' words in 1776. We'll also look at how those ideals matched, or didn't match, reality and history. Finally, we'll think about where rights come from and why it matters for citizens now.
Let's look closely at the key passage from the Declaration. These are the words that say some truths are so clear, so important, that they don't need complicated proof. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're going to break each part down and see why Jefferson and the other founders chose these words. The founders believed everyone has basic dignity and deserves respect simply for being human. So, when they wrote about being created equal and having rights endowed by their Creator, they meant rights come from something higher than government or popularity. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are the starting points, the things no one can take away just because of who you are. Equality, to the founders, means each person should be treated by the law as having equal worth, even if we are very different in talents or background. Unalienable rights are rights we all have, no matter what. A government shouldn't be able to give or remove them. And the pursuit of happiness isn't about a guarantee that everything will go well, but about being free to seek a good and meaningful life. Now, let's read each word slowly and think about why it's there. The founders believed powerful truths come from careful language. Every phrase and comma was debated for a reason. Understanding their choices helps us see what goals, hopes, and fears shaped our country's beginning. Being created equal insisted that no person is born with a right to rule others. Endowed by their Creator points to a source of rights beyond kings or laws, something higher and unchangeable. Unalienable rights mean there are some things about being human that never change, wherever or whenever you live. The phrase, all men are created equal, originally meant just that everyone has the same claim to basic rights. At the time, this didn't apply to everyone in practice, but the idea that some rights can't be taken away became a powerful argument for change.
So what does self-evident mean? Some truths are so clear that once you understand the words, you can't deny them. A triangle has 3 sides, for example. The founders thought equality and basic rights were like that, not up for debate, but facts everyone could see if they looked closely. A self-evident truth is obvious to any thinking person, without needing special proof. If you pause and consider the idea, it just makes sense on its own. The founders wanted to root America's new system in truths that didn't depend on tradition or power, but on reason and honesty. Self-evident truths matter because, without shared facts, it's impossible to have a fair system of laws or government. The law of non-contradiction, something can't be true and false at the same time, is a building block not just for math or science, but for basic fairness. Think of ideas like, the whole is greater than the part. No one needs to be convinced because it's just true by definition. These logical truths let us build everything from scientific theories to fair rules in society. This principle says, for example, you cannot be both completely at home and not at home at the same time. The founders used rules like this as a model for how their claims about rights and equality should work. Clear, logical, and impossible to honestly deny. 13.
When the Declaration was written, almost every country had kings, queens, and social classes. By stating that everyone is equal, America's founders were calling for a radical new way of thinking about government, one where power comes from the people, not birth or tradition. 13. Back in 1776, the phrase all men was mostly meant to refer to free, white men with property, because that's who was involved in politics. But over time, people pointed back to these words to demand that more groups be included, arguing, if it's true, then it should apply to everyone. Equality in the Declaration mostly meant legal and political equality, all deserving the protection of the law and a fair chance to participate. It didn't promise that everyone would have the same possessions, skills, or social status. At a time when the rest of the world was built on hereditary privilege, these ideas flipped the script. The Declaration said ordinary people, not just nobles or royals, had dignity and rights that leaders must respect.
Of course, not all Americans were included at first. Many groups, especially enslaved people and women, were excluded from rights and freedoms. This gap between ideals and reality has always been part of our national story. When the Declaration said all men, that was a goal, not always a fact. The struggle to make our ideals match reality has driven most of America's greatest changes and debates. Over generations, the ideals in the Declaration have inspired reformers to fight for the abolition of slavery, women's rights, voting rights, and civil rights. The principles written back then have power because people keep pushing to make them real. Being equal means everyone gets the same basic protection and respect under the law. The founders did not claim everyone would be identical in ability, wealth, or circumstances, but everyone starts with equal value and rights. Societies had almost always divided people by family, wealth, or class. America's founders said something different. Being human is enough to have rights. That's why the Declaration is still studied and debated all over the world. Even though the words, all men are created equal, were written in 1776, it took a long time, and a lot of struggle, for those words to start to include more and more Americans. 23.
The Declaration teaches that rights are not given to us by leaders or governments. Instead, they come with being human, from God or nature, and it is the government's job to protect, not invent, those rights. 23. If rights come from our Creator or from nature, no king or country can take them away. Governments exist to secure rights, not to create them. This idea was a new way to justify and limit political power. Natural rights are grounded in your humanity, like the right to think, speak, and live. Unalienable means you cannot lose or surrender these rights, even if you tried. Society's laws should only protect them more strongly. The right to life means you should be safe from harm or death by others. Liberty is the freedom to make your own choices, as long as you don't harm others. The pursuit of happiness is about seeking well-being and purpose, not just owning things. Now, let's take a look at how Jefferson intended the wording to be used. Let's take a closer look at the ideas of liberty and license, and how a good society manages both. Liberty means having the freedom to make choices, but that freedom is always shaped by laws and social rules. These boundaries aren't there to limit us unfairly. They help make sure everyone's rights are respected, and that life is fair and safe for all. License, on the other hand, is what happens when there are no boundaries. If everyone does simply whatever they want, with no limits, society can quickly become chaotic. Unrestricted license can lead to disorder, arguments, or even harm, because people end up ignoring the rights and needs of others. Balancing liberty and license is one of the toughest jobs for any country. It's all about finding the right mix. We want everyone to have space and freedom, but we also need rules that protect individual rights while keeping peace and justice in our communities. When this balance works, people can enjoy both freedom and safety. Jefferson wrote "pursuit of happiness" instead of "property" because he wanted Americans to value fulfillment and virtue, not just wealth and possession. The founders hoped this would encourage citizens to seek what makes life truly meaningful. Now it's your turn. Write 2 paragraphs reflecting on what it means that all men are created equal, how this is different from equality in ability or possessions, and how principles and practice have sometimes conflicted throughout American history. Today, we learned that America's ideals, self-evident truths, equality, and rights, are not just words from the past, but standards we keep working toward. As you move forward, think about how you can help make these ideals a reality for everyone in our community. 32.